Folks, we are going to be talking about who is hands down one of the best champions inside Raid Shadow Legends, but from debatably one of the worst factions inside Raid. And as you can probably see from the thumbnail, of course, we are going to be talking about Fyna, Blade of Arabia, from the High Elves faction. So she is the faction leader. She's one of the first faction unity champions, rather, that we actually had released into the game. And as you can see from the in-game reviews, people are very high on her. Now, I have the Hell Hades optimizer running in the background, and I noticed that was lagging things out a little bit, so I went ahead and paused that. But we're going to be talking about her and how it's a bit of a shame that there's not really anybody too crazy to pair her with at this point. And, you know, the fact that, again, the High Elves are potentially the worst faction in the entire game, if we're being completely honest, right? So let's go ahead and take a look at Fyna's kit, first of all, talk about how she's built, all those sorts of good things. First of all, she is fantastic in the way that she doesn't take many books. Now, she is a faction unity champion, and she takes only, right, only 8 legendary books, right? This is insane. With most legendaries that are releasing nowadays, we're talking like 10 to 15 skill tomes, even for fusions to fully skill them out. So the fact that she is such a powerful champion is fantastic, that we don't need to spend a ton of resources to max her out. Now let's go ahead and take a look at her skills. Now, first of all, I just want to say that obviously there's been a bit of contention going around the community with her. If you watch somebody like Big Bop Rock's video, where he spent over $700 to get this champion and had to pull over like 14 legendaries to do it, that's not the experience I had. I talked about this on that video. I pulled her on my second sacred when I was going for the Crocad fusion. Now, it's obviously lucky, and I understand that I am privileged to have pulled her, right? But my account has shortcomings in other areas, so it kind of is what it is. Let's go ahead and take a look at the A1 sword. Through time, attacks one enemy, has a 70% chance of increasing the cooldown of a random skill on the target by 2 turns. When counter-attacking with this skill, team up with a random ally. The ally joining the attack will use their default skill. Now, importantly, this is not necessarily a high elf champion. This is just a random champion on your team that's going to pair up with her. Now, apart from that, the other thing to consider is that her A1 is really the only thing that needs accuracy inside her kit, so I didn't really focus too much on that. But you will not falter A2 3-turn cooldown, place a block debuffs, block damage, and a counterattack buff on a target ally for 2 turns. If the target of this skill is not this champion, resets the cooldown of all of the target's skills. This skill's cooldown cannot be decreased, and this is really where we start to see her get use inside the game, because she's fantastic inside Chimera, inside Hydra, inside the arena, all of those locations, faction wars, because of this A2 predominantly, right? So there's a plethora of ways to use this. First of all, if you have somebody like a Marius, right, in Chimera, you can put this block damage on him, and he can now go ahead and whack with his A2 against the Ram form, and you don't need to worry about any of that reflected damage, which means that's now another cycle of the Chimera where you can be getting more damage, right? Or it'll help you get those actual requirements in terms of the damage done. So if you have like a Toshiro or something like that, you're trying to do damage against the boss, placing the counterattack, but also resetting their skills is going to be fantastic to facilitate that. So many use cases everywhere inside the game, right? Block debuffs as well as the block damage and the counterattack is very, very strong. Now, A3, this is where she starts to get her unity. So she places an increased attack, increased crit rate, and increased crit damage on all allies for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. If we start to bring other high elves, though, it gets even more insane. So with 1 faction ally, she's going to grant herself an extra turn after using this. With 2, with 4 placing buffs, removes all debuffs, so she's a cleanser as well. And with 3 faction allies, buffs placed by this skill cannot be removed. Incredibly strong stuff. We have a passive here. Whenever a buff is placed on an ally, fills their turn meter by 3%. That is the base level skill, ladies and gentlemen. It only gets stronger. High Elves Unity. So if she has 1 High Elf with her, allies deal 25% more damage when attacking out of their active turn. With 2, whenever a buff is removed or stolen from an ally, or when it expires, fills their turn meter by 10%. And finally, with 3, allies will ignore 5% of a target's defense for each buff on them. This is incredibly strong, ladies and gentlemen, because if you run her with 3 faction allies, which in a lot of content is going to be very easy, right? So especially Hydra, for example, we have 6 champions that can be run in there. Her, as well as, 3 others, is going to be very, very easily doable. And you'll still have a few flex spots. She becomes very strong. She's a cleanser. She's a turn meter filler, right? So she's your turn meter booster. She's amplifying damage. She's bringing ally attacks with her. She's bringing so much to the table. And finally, she has an ally speed in all battles by 20%, increasing ally crit rate in all battles by 15%. Only applies to high elves. So this could be very useful for faction wars, right? You could put her as your lead inside faction wars, then build out everybody else on your team with only 85% crit rate, since that's all you're going to need, which means that you'll have a lot more stats left over to put into things like attack, defense, those sorts of things, right? So she is fantastic. Now, in terms of the blessing, I have her in cruelty because she's only 1 star awakened, and then she can basically just decrease the defense of enemies up to 10% for champions, up to 5% for bosses. If you have a higher awakening on her, there's some fantastic options to use. You could use Lightning Cage if you're using her inside the arena in a Stone Skin build or something like that. Intimidating Presence would be very strong if you have her high awakened, especially for something like Siege. Temporal Chains is a good option. Probably not Life Harvest or Soul Reap. I'm kind of in the way of the blessings here, but it's okay. I'm using my beautiful voice to communicate. Polymorph would be very good if you either have her with high accuracy, which I don't, right? We're going to talk about that. Or if you have her 6-star Awaken. And then finally, that's probably really all you're going to want to run her in. So that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the masteries here. So I came down the defense tree and the support tree. I came down to lasting gifts for obvious reasons on the support tree. I want that chance to extend the duration of any buff cast. Additionally, I also have my rapid response, so she's going to have a chance to increase her own turn meter by 10% when a buff cast by this champion is removed or expires. Keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, if you are using her on a speed-tuned team, you do not want these masteries, right? I also got her with Cycle of Magic, and I got her with Lore of Steel for extra speed from my speed and perception sets. And then on the defense tree, again, I thought it was pretty obvious. I didn't see this recommended really anywhere. I was looking at the Hell Hades website, not to throw shade or anything. I was looking at the Hell Hades website, and they had her built out in the offense tree. But I'm going to put her into counter-attack masteries, because the way it works in Raid is she's not going to be able, at least I don't believe, we can test this, but I don't believe she's going to be able to pull in an ally with her counter-attack, right, through the mastery, because, like, for example, Marichka, she doesn't pull in Taurus when she does a counter-attack, but she still has that chance of increasing the cooldown of a random skill on the target by 2 turns every time she counter-attacks. So for PvP content especially, and for some PvE content, this is going to make our life immensely easier, right? And then we have Unshakable for some extra resistance. So all that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the build. We have 376 on the speed, we have 198 on the resistance, and 226 on the accuracy. We don't have much of note for resistance or accuracy. Obviously, if she was 5-star awakened, that would be a significant help. Or if I had more, faction guardians, that would help out a lot as well. But these are the stats that she's running. Almost 70,000 HP, 3,600 defense, only almost 3,700 defense. And then finally, we have Golden Elixir on her just because I didn't really have another relic to put on her. So ideally, if you're using her inside the arena, you'd put her with a Wand of Submission. It's going to give her speed and the chance to reflect CCs. You can't use Journal of Necrodos on her all that effectively because she doesn't do turn meter boosts, right? So even with her A3, she doesn't have that boost or anything like that. So that kind of puts a wrench into that plan. You could use Aspect of Sarath if you want to change things up and get a little bit freaky with it. Gilded Dragonstone be good for a prolonged fight as well. There's lots of options. You could also use her with the Orb of Transfixion. That would be fantastic, where she has that 10% chance to steal a random buff and it cannot be resisted, right, with all of her counterattacks going out there. That would be very, very strong. Lots of very, very good options. A Perch Shadow could be very decent as well if you have all of her skills on cooldown. Now, we talked about the champion, her build, all that sort of good stuff, but I said she's the best champion from the worst faction inside the game, and I do stand by that. When we talk about worst factions inside Raid Shadow Legends, there's a few contenders that come up, which is the Orcs, but they've gotten a lot stronger. We have the Lizardmen who come up as well, but they have some fairly decent champions these days. Unless you're trying to do DPS, my god, they're limited, right? And then we have Ogryn tribes, right? But all of these factions are kind of continually getting love, with the exception of the High Elves that nobody really talks about as one of the worst factions inside the entire game. Now, they have an interesting dynamic in the game, and I'll try to make this quick since we're mainly talking about the champion, of course. But we have a lot of speed boosters, right, who are primarily focused towards the arena. So we have somebody like an Arbiter who has the speed lead in the arena. Everybody gets her for free. She's doing increased attack, speed boosting. We have a Lysandra who's got the speed lead. She's got, you know, turn meter manipulation, all that sort of stuff. But then we just have really nothing to back it up, right? And that's what really sucks about this faction, and what kind of sucks about Fyna being a part of this faction. So you're really going to have a strong High Elves team, obviously, if you have the one mythical inside the faction. So the Galathier, if you're like me, if you're like 99% of the raid player base and you don't remortgage your house to swipe your credit card to get mythical champions, you're probably not going to have Galathier. There are some other, you know, there's some potential damage dealers in the faction, like we got Alexander for free, but I mean, he's just not really that good. Supreme Elhain was a fusion, but she is incredibly squishy, even for PvE content, with her 13,000 base HP. The one kind of good thing to talk about the High Elves is their base stats, right? So, for example, Fyna is one of the fastest base champions inside the entire game, with 113 on the base speed. Yannica, everybody can get for free, but apart from like faction wars and arena offense, she's not that good, right? She has a big slap on the A2, which is completely countered by aspect of Seroth and UDK, right? Simple as that. You know, she's completely countered. And then an AoE ignoring shield. It's a very power crept skill by now. We're not really too worried about shield. Probably the best damage dealer at a legendary level, I would say, is going to be Ethos, because he just, you know, he brings a lot to the table in terms of damage, but he's been so power crept as well. It's absolutely insane. Now, I know somebody is going to say, well, Gabriel YT, this is clearly not a reputable video. You said that you said that High Elves are bad, but you didn't talk about Athorion Wallmaster. And sure, fair, right? Athorion Wallmaster is a pretty okay champion, in my opinion. He doesn't do as much damage as you would hope, especially considering that he is a legendary, that he's from the High Elf faction, right? He has an AoE A1, doesn't do much damage, even if you build him out fully with attack. He has an AoE ×2 A2, which brings a lot of utility for stuff like Hydra, right? So it's bringing the block buffs, the decreased attack, and it's based on enemy max HP, so you'd think, oh, this is going to be fantastic, right? He's going to do a lot of damage. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, Husk and Royal Guard have higher damage multipliers for the enemy max HP than Wallmaster, so that's a bit of a shame. He does bring some self-buffs, which is nice, but, I mean, realistically, Fyna's bringing those anyway, so why would you really care about that? He's increasing his own max HP by 20%, but his damage doesn't scale at all off of max HP, or off of his max HP, rather, so I'd rather just have an attack amplification whenever he kills somebody, because it's going to be very rare that he actually kills somebody at a higher tier level of Hydra, right? It's a bit of a shame. We have some other niche options like Bellinor, Royal Huntsman. Certainly, if we go down to the epics, there's some okay options. So, for example, Ethlin is probably one of the best DPS units from this entire faction because of the CC that he brings. It's soft CC, though, albeit. We have Tayrel, who can do decent damage, right? Jingo Hunter's kind of okay. We have Elhain in here, who's a fantastic DPS unit, and then most people might be starting with her. And then we have Apothecary, but you don't get a faction unity champion and get excited to run them with epics or rare champions, right? You want to build a team of legendaries that you can use this with and just really have some fun with it, but alas, that doesn't seem to be an option with the High Elves. We're going to go ahead, we're going to do a couple of tests here inside the live arena, though, or not the live arena, sorry, the classic arena. Live arena is a bit of a shit show, to say the least, right now, so we're probably not going to be doing that. We're going to put in Fyna. We're going to pair her with, of course, Carnage for the best in-slot, you know, aura. We're going to bring in an Arbiter so that we get that extra turn mechanic on her A3. And then we're going to bring in maybe another High Elf if we can find somebody else to bring in. So if I go to Factions, High Elves, I don't even know if my Lysandra is built. Excuse me, let's see. I don't think she is. She's incredibly slow. Let's take a look here. Yeah, she's missing a helmet. Which, I mean, it's whatever. We're going to bring in Lysandra anyway. So this is going to be the kind of team that we take in against this other speed team. We have better speed aura and all that sort of good stuff, so I'd expect to go first, but people these days are crazy fast, so who really even knows? Love to see this. This guy's either built out inside immunity or inside, inside Feral, which is fantastic. Now, what we can do here is we can place the block damage as well as counterattack on Carnage, which is very strong, obviously, because Carnage, with his counterattacks, is absolutely busted. We do get the block passives here on the Sun Wukong as well, so if we manage to take a turn, we'll switch forms with our Carnage, and then we'll go ahead and slap him down. Now, we do reflect the stun there onto the Armands, which is quite nice. We also spread out the block passives again. We're going to go ahead and just whack in here with the Carnage. There we go. Everybody sits down. We don't need to worry about Sun Wukong coming back because he has the block passives on him, so we can kind of just, you know, whittle them down over time. And there we go, doing over 70k per hit. Now, that being said, this team and its success is in no way contributed to, first of all, either the Fyna being in here because we didn't counterattack a whole lot, or, more importantly, any of the other high elf options. So if I just bring in some random team, we're probably still going to get the job done, right? So we'll bring in like a Fabian, and we'll bring in, actually maybe like an Armands. I'm just trying to think. I think Crixie is actually going to be the way to go, and then we'll bring in a UDK to take the slaps from the Taurus and the Odin there, obviously, right, on their A2 and their A3 respectively. So we'll go ahead and see if we can go faster. We're probably not going to, though, considering these are all 6-star Awakened champions. And then they do have a lot of Polymorph on their team as well, so unfortunately, our Crixie does get Polymorph there, which is a bit of a shame. Fyna does get slapped around a little bit by the Taurus as well. We do get the increased cooldown on the Taurus because of Fyna's A1 and those counterattack masteries, ladies and gentlemen, so that's pretty strong. We're going to get the buffs up at least, but we don't get the extra turn, obviously, because of the fact that the high elf is not on the team. That's what I was trying to say. I couldn't think there for a second, but we're probably going to get clapped here. Even with a UDK on the team, I don't think there's really a way that Carnage can pull this off on his own. We do take out the Odin there, which is quite nice. The UDK sits down, right? Trying to make this a somewhat accessible team definitely doesn't go easy. I mean, to be fair, this is a 37 million player power account. I'm just over 20 million player power, so you know, we'd kind of expect crazy things. We'll try something like this here. I'll actually bring in my own Noel as well. Something like this, just so we can get some extra sheep in here. Start throwing the sheeps around. Obviously, everybody in the arena loves sheep, right? It's going to be fantastic for everybody, a good experience overall. There's no way this will go wrong. My Fyna is actually faster than my Crixie, which is kind of funny. Now, obviously, we don't have any sort of a high elf champion on this team, so we can't really do a whole lot. We do get the freeze on the Lady Noelle there, which is quite nice. Obviously, if we got the stone skin off of the Embrace, that would have been even nicer. We'll go ahead and try to slap around the Noelle a bit. We'll get the block passives and the block actives. We'll go ahead and buff up on our Carnage so that even when Embrace switches forms, we don't need to worry about him getting slapped. Everybody else gets slapped, though, unfortunately. But we do have the guaranteed counterattacks coming in now from the Embrace, which is from the Carnage, which is very, very strong because it's going to allow us to do some crazy things like this, for example, where we're going to metamorph. We have the block passives on the Embrace, so there's going to be nothing he can do. And there we go. That team is done and dusted from a 21 million player power account, somebody who has a pretty nice Madame Cerise skin, to be honest. We'll try a team like this, right? I doubt we're going to be faster, but we do have a stronger speed aura. We'll have to see. If you're running Fyna in teams like this, and if you're really just depending on being faster, I'd definitely recommend to bring some sort of an intimidating presence so you can guarantee that you're faster. That Fabian definitely would have cut in if he was built inside Supersonic, by the way. So if you're using a champion inside PvP in Raid in 2025 and they're a Fabian-esque champion, make sure, ladies and gentlemen, put them in Supersonic, at least a 4-piece set, because contrary to what some content creators out there might tell you, Supersonic is the best set in the entire game for PvP related content. Now, we do get clapped a little bit there by the Embrace, which is a shame. We do get some turns coming in here. Now, what we want is to be able to buff up our Carnage, just like so. We're going to go ahead and heal the Carnage, place the increased speeds. We're going to get the block buffs on everybody as well, so that we don't need to worry about the annoying-ass Odin. We're going to go ahead and A3 onto the Embrace there. He's not coming back. We get the increased cooldown from the Fina's A1. You can see just how strong she is, right? Like, we're making sure that our Carnage stays alive. We're giving him all the buffs he could possibly want. We're doing increased cooldowns, all those sorts of things. It's just that she gets so much stronger when she's paired with a high elf champion. And it's so hard to pair her with a high elf champion because the high elf champions that we have are all kind of dookie that have been power crept into obscenity, right? The other option I could think of is maybe Andrisia with her passive where she's protecting somebody. You could run Andrisia, Fyna, Elhain, right? Specifically Supreme Elhain would be a decent option. But, I mean, War Master Athorion, you're not using him inside PvP. Most people aren't even using him anymore inside Hydra, right? You go and look at the top teams, and we'll talk about this. We'll actually go and take a look. I'll fact check myself. You go and look at the top teams, though, inside Hydra. Ain't nobody running Athorion, or if they do, it is very, very rare. Now, we do have the unfortunate side of things here that we were locked out, and the Tholen is too fast. So, we're going to try and run against that particular team again. 10 million player power account with that much speed is pretty crazy, by the way. So, we're going to bring in probably our Arby, just because she is still the fastest champion on my account. She is now at 392 speed. We don't have any sort of supersonic on the Fabian, so obviously that's helping us out a lot. We're going to get the lockout now, which is fantastic. Something that's kind of misleading here and there is you can't really see it because of my big-ass forehead, but if you look at Fyna, she's got that, like, little aura below her, right? And in my opinion, it always looks like she's frozen. So I, like, look at her out of the corner of my eye quite often. I'm like, how the hell is she frozen? There's nobody on the end of the team that can freeze her, right? So if you look there, you kind of see what I'm talking about. But we're going to get the counterattacks coming in from the Carnage now. The counterattacks from the Carnage actually finish off the fight for us. So, that being said, let's go ahead and let's take a look at Hydra, right? Let's go to like Nightmare, right? And how do I do this? In here, boss guide, teams of the week, right? Let's just scroll through here and see if we see anybody using Wallmaster Athorion. Looking like a lot of Titus, a lot of Teox, a lot of, you know, a lot of Trunda, Shocker, right? We don't see any Wallmaster. Don't see any Wallmaster. For that matter, we don't see any Fyna either, to be honest. But let's go ahead and take a look at some of the lower levels in case, you know, those commenters were talking about Wallmaster. We see a Fyna here resetting a Trunda. Right, pretty fantastic stuff. We see double Trundas here. We're not seeing too much for Fynas, but you know what else we're not seeing? We're not seeing a single Wallmaster in use. We're going to go to hard. We're going to go to teams of the week, you know. And obviously this is a bit anecdotal here. Here we go. We have a decent team here, actually, that are using the high elf side of things, so that's fantastic. And obviously, like I said, this is anecdotal, right? These are the top teams of the week. These are the free-to-play options that Plarium wants us to emulate. So it's going to be just a little bit, you know, questionable. Some of the... There's a Wallmaster. We got the first one. We got Fyna and Wallmaster. Let's go, ladies and gentlemen. We have one Wallmaster being used out of every single top Hydra team of the week, right? and that kind of really drives it home. We've seen a few other high elf champions in there, right? So we'll see like an Arbiter or those sorts of things. But, you know, we need better options to run with her. She's still incredibly strong on her own. I'm still so happy to have her, because what I'll be doing is I'll actually probably be running her inside my Chimera damage team. So I'll be running her in here with this current team. I think I'll be replacing Lady Aerith with Fyna, because she can bring a reset, whereas Lady Aerith brings a pseudo reset, but then also the fact that she has a turn meter increase when you receive a buff, and in the fact that Amber Heart is placing so many continuous heal buffs, but then also filling turn meter, and then also filling turn meter when a continuous heal pops, right? So that's fantastic. And then the turn meter fill from the Fyna coming in as well is going to be sort of like using an Oparden, what is it, Oparden Clanfather here or something like that, right? I don't have him. I didn't go for the fusion, unfortunately, which I regret, but it is what it is, right? You live and you learn, I suppose. Fun fact, I also didn't do the newt fusion, but I was lucky enough to pull a newt. So, that being said, this is a 25-minute showcase. I sometimes say I hope these videos were helpful, but this time, I know it is, ladies and gentlemen. I know it is. I know if you have Fyna, you're going to be watching this video and you're going to get some good tips and tricks out of it. So, we just crossed 3,000. We didn't cross 3,000, I lied. It's like 2,800 subscribers. 3,000 is on my brain because 3,000 is the goal by end of 2025. So make sure to go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you've made it this far in the video. Clearly, you sort of like the content if you're sticking around with my monotone commentary after 25 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you guys all so much for watching. I'll see you next time.